There's a big problem in the world today, and that is around the affordability of housing, about individuals who, young, generally people that have a dream of owning a home one day and feeling like there's just no way to achieve that. There is a way for you to do it. Hey there, and welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Rod Schulhauser joins me today. Rod, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. And you know what? I love talking to people who love to find out what makes people tick. I've really enjoyed your podcast over the last couple of years, and that's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, we've had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit over the past several months, just in an initiative around the real estate investment network with the self-funding house. We'll probably talk a little bit about that. But when somebody asks you today, because I always look at bios, this is one of the things about as business owners, as kind of public. We have front-facing roles often, and we have these bios, and they tend to grow old, although not always. But in this case, bio aside, when somebody meets you today and says, "So, Rod, what do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Well, I love starting it with a catchphrase, meaning that what I do is called implementeering. And the response is, "Oh, what the heck's that?" And being an engineer, I coined the phrase and created the phrase implementeering because what I've really dedicated my entrepreneurial life, which is really the last 30 years of my life, has been in implementing the dreams and visions of high performing entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's my entrepreneurship coming through to recognize that role. But I love creating and making somebody else's dream and vision become a reality. I love to create stuff. And so that's probably the highest level bucket I could give you, Patrick.
So when you think about that role and the fact that you've identified it, there is a in the coaching world, and I want to talk about your experience with strategic coach because you were part of that as well, I recall. But let's just talk about this implementeering and your role in terms of supporting others. Do you think that in the world of entrepreneurship, here's my observation: not everybody is cut out to be a CEO. And as much as I wear the hat called CEO of a couple of my businesses, like you, I sometimes think, I'm a better second position than I am a first position. Sometimes I come to that conclusion. I used to, with a couple of partners that I've had over the years, I used to consider myself a Sherpa. Like, they're going to lead the way up the mountain. I got my hand and I'm just pushing them up the mountain. I'm supporting them in climbing that mountain. And I really enjoy that role. Is that kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, Rod?
Yeah, it is because what I really observed early on, this was after my corporate engineering life of my first 10 years, is that high performing entrepreneur. So I'm not talking about somebody who's thinking about being an entrepreneur for the
Yeah.
first time. I'm definitely, talking about the high performing existing entrepreneur. I really observed two conclusions or two things that dominated. Number one is their makeup tends to have a certain predictability about it. And I don't mean just personality, but their strengths, their weaknesses, their focus tends to come to a common place, which probably drives their success, I believe. And knowing that, once I figured that part out and realized that and really applied it, was what comes with that are common traps or issues that those high performing entrepreneurs have to deal with that maybe they don't always recognize themselves. They recognize the symptoms, but not necessarily the causes. So I love going in as this implementeering guy because I can help them with the common traps of a high performing entrepreneur relating to their business, time and, breaking through their ceilings of complexity, all these kinds of things that are common. And I think what I also brought to them and bring to them is because I understand their makeup, I don't get offended. I don't react to. I'm not really affected by the unique mannerisms of high performing entrepreneurs. Just as a quick example, high performing entrepreneurs can often be misunderstood as being rude and short
Mm.
sighted and being cut off. But no, from their side, that's them being efficient with time, being to the point, not wasting other people's time. But maybe to the lay person, they say, "Oh, that person's rude. They're not, they're." But I get it. I get their space, and that's what allows me to be effective in working with them.
That's such a great point, because when you think about, and even let's look at some of the front facing public figures, whether that be an Elon Musk or, I don't know, Richard Branson, to the degree we see him, Jeff Bezos, like big names that you see, they're actually known for that in terms of being direct, being curt and abrupt. If you take things like that personally, because it's never intended personally, to your point, it's just efficient use of time. Why do we need to discuss it? Go. It's like that, curt and abrupt. And I think, to your point, for some people, that will land as offensive and hurt my feelings kind of stuff. And you're realizing that in the people that you've worked with, there's a degree of that just comes with the nature of the beast, if you will, as well as creativity. Some of the things that I've learned over myself over the years is that some of the individuals like you're talking about, really high performing heads and entrepreneurs, business owners, is there's a degree of creativity that doesn't include implementation, doesn't include execution. It's no, we're going to do this, get it handled. Is that a little bit of what you're experienced over the years as well?
Yeah, because if I'm going to be that implementeering person for them, my number one job needs to be keeping them in their gift zone. So
Mm-hmm.
they are the progenitor of ideas, they're the visionary, etc. Keep them in their space and fill in the voids that they themselves can't, don't love, don't have time for, probably give short shrift to, because it's not their focus. They don't speak that language. And so I think what matters most is understanding what matters most to them,
Mm.
and that comes with the short-sightedness, the rudeness or whatever. Misunderstood is that, well, you have to understand what matters most. So if what matters most to me is implementing their dream or vision, it's amazing how easy it is to get them to talk about their dreams and vision.
Mm.
That's, I mean, if you gave them a day, they'd take a day, and they have a day's worth of download to give you with a vision. And there, it's almost a segue here, Patrick, is that I wonder how many great ideas get stifled because
Oh,
they stay here and never land in the lap of somebody who can do something with it, or that gave a care about it. Because the human being is just a creative zone of unrealized potential, isn't it? And but I think you're right. If these entrepreneurs, if you can just focus on implementing what they want and allow them to keep focused on the next thing, then they're going to solve and create the things that they're destined to be involved in. I think
mhm.
that one of those traps I was talking about, what are those traps of those entrepreneurs? One of them is realizing that there's only certain things they should do and certain things they shouldn't do. Michael Gerber wrote the book E-Myth decades ago, which
Love it.
talked about the entrepreneur, right? And usually the entrepreneur is one person, but the entrepreneur needs to be three buckets. It needs to be that visionary, it needs to be that manager, and it needs to be that technician. So if the entrepreneur inventor comes up with something, they can't be the R&D person, the marketing person, and the visionary, and they usually are. And that's usually why you have this high number of entrepreneurs that fail, because they try to be all three. And I think that's what I realize, is that there's a role for me, because there's the part of that I really love to do.
It's such a great point, in that I know my own experience over many years of working with entrepreneurs, business owners, real estate investors, where we say treat your real estate investing like a business. Not everybody is designed to play all roles. And one of the most difficult things with entrepreneurship, back to the E-Myth, or the E-Myth Revisited, really the story of that is about an individual who has the business and then stays in the role of technician, never becoming a business owner. And ultimately, they buy themselves a job and they're stuck there because they don't know how, or don't think through to surround yourself with people smarter than you, more gifted than you in things that you can't do or are not equipped to do. It doesn't mean you're less than or that you're not smart enough. It just means that you take your dream, your vision, your gift, and then I guess, offload, delegate the things that you need that you're not great at. And I've, like you, have run across many really brilliant entrepreneurs who want to do it all, can't seem to find somebody or don't think to find somebody like you that can actually operationalize a business. When I came into British Columbia and took over the real estate investment network, I did that with Don R. Campbell, who owned the business at the time, and he could not operationalize the business. He was really struggling with the operations. He brought me in, we operationalized the business, and eventually I bought the business from him. But that was his realization that he finally got to as well, is that he's great at a lot of things, but operations was just not his game, and he couldn't execute, he couldn't work with a team. And so having that realization early on in an entrepreneurial journey would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
When you, let me go back to one thing. I don't want to step over, and we'll circle back to this conversation because I think it's so great. But I want to know about your engineering. Like, you came from a corporate engineering world, and what type of engineer were you? Were you a mechanical engineer? Were you I don't know, whatever other engineers there are? What part of the engineering world did you live in?
Yeah, I actually chose mechanical engineering, but not
Okay.
because I like mechanical engineering. Is because mechanical back in the day when I was at McMaster University was a little bit of every engineering discipline, chemical process, electrical, computer, all these different disciplines. And I'm glad I did that because it rounded out. I wanted being an engineer in the process controls industry. So and I got a chance to travel the globe and manage a team of 100 engineers before I was 30 years old. So it was great. But my entrepreneurial bug hit actually, Patrick, when I hit that top of my career, realizing it was only one position above my head, and I didn't want it.
Mm,
And I probably was financially tapped out. And so entrepreneurship landed in my lap because of that, because I love processes. And with processes come results. And I think that's what came full circle into this implementing things. I love to create things, but I'm not necessarily the best progenitor of those new ideas. And it's just fabulous to see that because a lot of what you said at the beginning of your last comments there was that there are many entrepreneurs that don't realize it. And you told the rain story, but what rain does, and like what you guys do with your community, is you provide that coaching, you provide that insight, and probably more importantly, the foresight of the challenges to come. And I think that if those budding entrepreneurs, or maybe even those great entrepreneurs, maybe they're fine money wise, but they're time starved,
mm,
entrepreneurs who can't seem to get to that next level of either success, finances, time, or ambition, they should seek out that coaching in their space. Every good entrepreneur that I've seen that has been highly successful, and my personal definition is that whatever their definition of success is, I like to bolt on one phrase at the end, and you get a life too,
mm,
right? Because most of them can't add on that bottom piece. But I often justify the idea it's worth the investment of your time and energy to get that third party coaching, that insight, because you can then add on the and get a life too. Because not all entrepreneurs have an exit strategy, have a destination in mind. They're just go, 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 and no time to look beyond the immediate horizon to actually look at the long term horizon. So I think that it's kind of like what you and I both believe in, because we've had enough conversations to know this, that we believe and love the whole idea of personal and professional development. And
mhm.
if you're not constantly learning, you're decaying because you're resorting back to the past, your old habits and everything else. So I think that to strive and thrive, you need that coaching element if you're going to get to that ultimate destination. So I don't know if that kind of gets to where you were. You asked me what I did, but you can tell I went from engineering and then into a different mindset altogether.
So what was your shift from being in that corporate world to going on the path of entrepreneurship? I just literally had a conversation last night with a really uber successful entrepreneur, business owner, and we were chatting about just different conversations. And I'd read an article on, we were talking, of course, we get on the conversation of politics and government, but also on business. And somebody had commented that he realized in his corporate world, he worked his ass off to climb into the C-suite. That was his goal. I want to be in those corner offices. I want to be in that boardroom. I want to be talking to the board of directors. And he had this story he was telling himself that those people got to be really cool. They got to be really smart. And then he realized that when he got into that C-suite at a very young age, he went, these these people aren't all that particularly smart. And he had at that time, because of the role, also some exposure into politics and was working with politicians. And he goes, it is just blew my mind how many people think that our politicians, our government, our C-suite workers are really smart, because they're not. They're not any smarter than probably anybody else. They have a couple of gifts, but if you're looking for solutions in a C-suite, anyways, the point of it was he went on to build a multi-billion-dollar business. The point of it in that conversation last night was that's how it came up, was that we have this thing that we sometimes think what it is, and then the reality of is it's not that at all. And so he went on, that particular person who had made that comment went on to build a significant business. So when you got to that level of corporate world, did you have a similar realization that you're going, no, this is not what I thought it was? Or what took you off of that corporate world that you were in for 10 years, you said, I think, and took you on your entrepreneurial journey?
So the eye opener, I'll tell you the eye opener, I'll tell you what happened. The eye opener was financially oriented, meaning that I pretty well maxed out my engineering income at an early age, just because I want to be in a company that just grew massively quickly, and I got to that point of being quite financially successful, and I started thinking about where I wanted to go next. And there was no path above that, really. There was the president's job, but I didn't want the president's job. But what I did wind up doing is I wound up getting connected to an entrepreneur, and I didn't go looking for this, but what I learned was he thought significantly differently from all the people that were currently mentoring. I had a great mentor in my career. Like, he was a great mentor, still in touch with him today to this standpoint. But that was in the box of the job world, right? It wasn't in the entrepreneurial space. But I met an entrepreneur and I started following him, and he wound up. And this was just before. This was like the mid '90s. So if you know where the '94 was, e-commerce was just at the cusp in the late '90s, and the internet and the year 2000, all that. And one of the largest, and actually the first e-commerce project involving IBM and Microsoft, he was leveraging on part of that. And he wanted somebody to come on board with him to implement what they were doing in e-commerce in Canada and put together an educational program and everything else about it. So I did that. I took that leap. So I think what it was, you have to first identify a problem and a desire to do something differently.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go looking for the answer, and then the solution does appear. And that's what happened. Was the solution didn't appear, and then I weighed the odds. I knew I had a challenge, and I didn't know what the answer was. And sure enough, because you're looking, because you're open to other ideas, you're looking for a different mindset input. It showed up. It showed up within 2 years of me recognizing that, and it was a big leap of faith. And when you talk to parents after getting an education in engineering and do all that, it's a different mindset when you're dealing with it. But you know what? Everybody loved it. Everybody supported it. Nobody said don't do it. Everybody said you should do it. And that just showed me the confidence they had in me. But you know what? I probably was the biggest second guesser. Nobody else was. And once you get into that space, it became a whole reprogramming of this that I still love to this day. And it was an awesome journey.
Well, I often ask the question of my guests: is it nature or nurture? So when you think about your own journey, did it come to you as a nurture, or was it somewhere in your nature because of parents, because of upbringing? What was it that actually led you? Like, I get that you had a mentor, but if you go back in your journey as a young man, even probably before you went into the corporate world, was it get an education, get a job? Was it that kind of traditional view of it? Or was there an entrepreneurial aspect of even how you were raised?
Yeah, no, I think it was definitely the nurture, because I definitely grew up in the get a job, get married, get a home, and everything will work out great mentality, because that's where both mine and my wife's family, that was a common element. There was no entrepreneur example, in my family,
Mhm.
and nor in my wife's Debbie's family. And I think that it was definitely a nurture, and I think that that's again part of the coaching. Like, if you have a life coach who's not a paid life coach, but if you had that mentor, maybe it was an uncle, maybe it was somebody who you can spend your lifetime with, and they're constantly guiding you and holding your hand, then it becomes that much easier. And I think that's what I was fortunate to do for the first few years. And then once I figured out what implementeering was for me and created it, then I found a whole series of people that I could apply to it. And I guess I'm fortunate that I can choose who I want to work with, because there's lots of people who are looking for the kind of answers I can provide, but there's only one me. And I treat it like going in and helping that person and create their business. And often I take on an executive role, and then I hire my replacement and I get out. Because again, I'm not looking for that job. I want to stay in that entrepreneurial space 100% for sure. And that's what I love.
So you've played, I guess, a significant role over the years in other businesses. So was you? So what I'm understanding is you were the business of Rod Schulhauser, going in, consulting slash coaching slash filling a role, creating the space for somebody else to step into. So in other words, you come in, operationalize, wear the hat of president, for example, and go, okay, so I've created the space. Here's the systems. Here's the team. Now I need to replace myself. Is that kind of vaguely at a high
Exactly.
level what you did?
Yeah, and if it's a big, I mean, one of my recent clients about 10 years ago, that's exactly what I did. They were already a significant company, but we went from significant to $1 billion, and that took operational and creation of systems and all of that, and that's exactly what I did. I got myself out of that career, but it also holds true for the smaller person. So somebody who's got a smaller business, they may be a high performing entrepreneur, but they might be in wealth management, they might be in real estate, they might be in some vertical market, and we might be creating and helping them with their entrepreneurial challenges, creating a business, they're getting beyond they themselves being the business. One of the typical traps of the entrepreneur is they're the business, they're everything, and that there's no asset if they're not part of the business. And so you have to then create that structure, that those systems behind them. And that's everything from marketing to sales to structure to content to thinking above and beyond where they're currently at, and then taking them to becoming an actual business entity rather than just a business person. So, there is not one particular model, but what does remain common are the challenges of that entrepreneur, the fact that they're already successful and high performing, both financially and recognized in their industry, et cetera. And I think it's like, once I can see them breaking through to that next level they never gotten to, and they were hoping that I could help them get to, then I know my job was done then. But I've even had a couple people come back again because they set a new bar, and that's awesome when it keeps on going that way. So I'm not loyal to the industry. I'm loyal to the cause.
Mm.
Things have changed in my life, as I got older here now, and I'm looking for simplification. I've dedicated in certain spaces. You talked about the self-funding house and things like that, but there still is always that entrepreneurial bug, and the entrepreneurial part will not change. I
Mm.
will stay in that, and that's always going to be my focus. But uh, I love it. I love where I'm at, and I'll just end it with this in terms of this thought chain: is that I don't have a destination in mind in terms of I'm not trying to work to an age and retire. A lot of my clients feel the same way, which is retire to what? And Derek Lobo, who we don't have a vision to retire. This is retirement. When you can dictate money, time, security, choices, to me, that is the ultimate destination. And I want to work and be effective and be of value by doing something. I'm not retiring to a couch. I'm not retiring to travel. My wife and I, we took our kids on all the traveling we wanted to do when we were younger, because we thought that was the right time to do it, when we were physically mobile, really energetic, and loved
Smart.
doing that piece, and a great experience for the kids too. So anyway, so that's where we're at.
Well, yeah, and I love that thought process as well. As I'm in a similar position where I've often thought about it, which is, what would I do if I wasn't doing what I'm doing? And I don't have a really clear answer on that. I'm going, no, I kind of like what I'm doing. I'll just keep doing this until something changes. But certainly retirement, I've often joked about being on the Freedom 95 program because ultimately I just can't imagine myself, either number one, sitting around, or number two, golfing every day or pickleball every day. I mean, that's great to occasionally do that. We were recently on a vacation and, we were gone a couple of weeks, not quite, but ultimately it's like, okay, time to get back. This is kind of boring. I mean, as nice as it was, and it was a nice break, and Stephanie and I hung out. It was like, okay, yeah, let's move on. Let's get back to our life. We don't go on vacation from our life. So that was kind of how that all unfolded for us recently. It's a reminder that if you're loving what you do, it's all good, in spite of even the challenges, because it's not like there isn't challenges that come with it all. When we look at what's going on in the world today, we still face challenges, but that's also part of the game. You want to look at the game, and an old coach of mine said, so if you get on the field and all you do is score goals, pretty soon that gets really boring, and then you're playing a different game and you're trying to make it harder. But you get on the field and you got some challenges against the team that you're playing against, and you win by the skin of your teeth. That's a fun game. Those are cool games, right? So
Yeah.
he looks at it and offers a business analogy like that. He goes, we want it to be easier, but the reality of it is that the best game to win is the one where you're challenged. So I sometimes have to remind myself of that.
Yeah.
you know
Well, one of my mentors did a similar thing, and I coin his phrase all the time. Is that that formula for me is dream, goal, struggle, victory. And I think
mm.
that's why I never want to retire, because as long as I have a dream, a goal, a struggle, and a victory, there's a path there. Then just do it again with a new. It's when you only have one of them. If all you do is have a goal and you never reach the goal, you're chasing the goal. It's easier to give up the goal than to go through the struggle to get there. But if you have that dream, that struggle, that will help you ultimately get that. And I
There's
love that. But I
so
never would have thought of this stuff if I was an employee.
well,
That's
no,
my job mentality.
that's it. Yeah, I mean, job mentality is go to work, do what you need to do to justify your paycheck, and go home. Generally, now that's a kind of a sweeping statement, but that's often the case. The it's what you brought up, and kind of where this conversation goes with me is often around just how much mental slash mindset is required in all of this. When we look at what you just said, there's part of that equation that you gave was struggle. You have that dream, but then there, along the way, there is that struggle. And there's all these memes out there, there's hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them, but they all, when you look at the memes, if you stop and look at them for just a moment, you start to realize that they are created because they're true. There is a truth to it. And so what I'm thinking about is that the analogy, if you will, or metaphor, is that we don't get stronger without resistance. If you go to a gym and you want to get stronger, you have to lift increasingly more weight. And even if you just want to maintain some strength, you've got to add resistance to it. And I think, to me, that plays out in so many ways in life, whether it's in relationship, challenges of communication that you might have, whatever you're facing in terms of economic headwinds in a business. Our ability to face and get through that resistance is really what makes us stronger. I think about what you said about a mentor, and sometimes even today at 66 years old, I reflect and I go, gosh, I wish I would have had a me in my life when I was 35. Because there's just things that you can't, that most can't get to, at least I couldn't, until you got the years, until you've been on this planet long enough where that wisdom comes in and you start to realize. And I think the point of this story, or this thought process for me, is that it does take a shift of our mindset to realize, the old phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's the resistance conversation. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, because like I said, dream, goal, struggle, victory. I agree. Struggle is probably the most important step, because you could replace the word struggle with learning.
Mm-hmm.
Dream, goal, learn, and then there's a victory.
Mm-hmm.
Because wisdom is gained two ways. You can gain it through your own challenges and coming out the other end, or you can also glean some wisdom from those of other people's challenges and what they learn. So I think as long as you are learning, your mindset will continue to be I'll just say, sharp or in the position to lead at something. My favorite topic in the world is that of leadership. I think everything rises and falls on leadership, whether that's a business, a relationship, finances, you name it. Leadership is everything. And so if lead, like, what good leader out there, pick a category, military, sports team, whatever, what leader out there didn't have a downtime and did something about it?
Mm.
Which leader out there never had a challenge at all in their life? We all know the answer to that. And so I
Yeah.
think if you realize that the struggles should be invited and not avoided, because in the corporate world, struggle over here, problem over here, great, I'll go in this direction.
Mhm.
Entrepreneurial space has challenge over here, great, let's tackle it, because on the other side of that challenge is the victory, whether
Mhm.
that's financial, whether it's technical. And I think that's the fundamental mindset difference, is one of avoidance or attraction. And we have the choice of what to avoid, and we have the choice of what to get attracted to. And I think that, to me, was a huge awareness from, job mentality Rod to entrepreneurial Rod. But it wasn't an overnight thing. It definitely was a nurture, like what you said. Did it have prior influence, or was it nurture? It was definitely a nurture for me, and I'm continuing that nurture process today.
Now, you've worked with lots of entrepreneurs, and you're, of course, been very observant of yourself and others. You talk about leadership, and I've asked this question of guests in the past, Rod, but is from your perspective, I mean, you've been very successful in your life. You've supported many entrepreneurs being successful. Uh, when you look at leadership, there is a fundamental that you hear this phrase, well, he or she are natural leaders. Do you see natural leadership, or do you think leadership is a study uh, for individuals who are in fact wanting to be great leaders? Do you think it's a study, or when you work with entrepreneurs, do you find that many just go, no, it is what it is. I don't need to study anything. What's your thoughts on that study of leadership or not?
Well, I'm very opinionated on that. So
Yeah.
I'll start with the opinion, and then I'll give the rationale. So my opinion is, leadership can be taught to anybody. There are
Mhm.
some people who are born with leadership because their personality, their mindset is such that that makes them a good leader. But you can take an individual who may not be a strong voiced, outgoing, Napoleon Bonaparte, Churchill like leadership qualities of an individual, and they can be a leader. All you have to do is look at a Wayne Gretzky, or, if we talk about hockey, you talk about, there's a lot of great leaders that weren't the verbose, outspoken, loudest voice in the room. They let their skill set take place, but they were wise, they were smart, they had mindset. And, was Gretzky a talented hockey player at a very young age? Yeah, I had the pleasure of playing against him back when I was single digits years old. Brantford's a stone's throw here from where I live.
Mm.
But his leadership didn't come into place probably till he was in his teens, for sure, when he was put into that position to be amongst men, shall we say. But I think leadership is a formula. The reason I'm convinced it can be taught is because there are levels of leadership. It isn't like, I'm not a leader and now I'm a leader. There's a path to leadership. I think the first level of leadership is just being a willing student. If
Mm.
you learn, you can get to a level of leadership, because now, once you learn something, whatever that context is that you're learning about, you can immediately lead other people who are not yet learning, and lead them to learn. Now you're a leader to that degree of those people, right? And then when you start to learn and start leading other people to learn, you're now leading those people. Well, you can just see how the progress works. That once you learn something, then you do it, whatever that learning is applied to. When you do it and do the dream, goal, struggle, victory, and ascend those ranks of whatever it is that you are climbing up to be, whether it's business or a relationship, you can put any context to it. You then can lead the way of others. Then all of a sudden, you can be leading a path for others that you don't even know. That's why I don't like these. I'm not a fan of, even though everyone by themselves is accurate. I don't like one catchphrase of what is leadership. Give me the definition of leadership. I don't think there's one sentence that embodies what leadership is. Is leadership influence? I've often heard that one in the day.
Mm.
Yeah, it is, but that's not the only thing it is. I've had the pleasure of meeting and sitting down and being at a board table for a couple of days with people like John C. Maxwell. And you guys start to understand that even though his book may only, each one of his books teaches one principle, he gets it, that there's a big process, there's a big context behind that of leadership. And I believe that context is accurate, but it can be taught and anybody can learn it. It's whether someone applies it and to what level they apply it that determines the position of their leadership.
So when you look at entrepreneurs overall, and I like this topic, for our listeners who are, and many are entrepreneurs, when you look at your experience, is there a common, list of, I think, is there a top two or three things that you see that get in the way of people or entrepreneurs and achieving what they're trying to achieve? Uh, you know, I often work with individuals who, have a tendency. I have worked with individuals. I don't say often. I have worked with individuals whose tendency was to blame circumstances. Then I recognize that there are those individuals who I see are successful have a far greater tendency to not look outside themselves and blame anything. They only look at themselves. They're always looking in the mirror, which is a philosophy that I embrace. So that's just an example. Is there a common thread that you see that, where it's a breakdown of entrepreneurship or qualities of entrepreneurs that actually have them excel? Either way, is there two or three things that you would point out that, if you're listening to this, here's a way to self-assess. Are you
Yeah.
blaming? Are you complaining? That's just one thread to pull on. Or do you actually look at it and go, okay, how could I have done better? Anything on
Yeah,
that topic?
totally. And my eyes are going to gaze over here because I'm going to look at what's on the desktop of my computer on my multiple screens here. And one half of it is called Leadership Is. And it's my constant reminder of what you're asking. I'll quickly read the 10 items there. You can pick
Please,
one if you want to,
please.
but I think it answers exactly what you're asking. So it says leadership is casting the vision, leading by example, demonstrating high work ethic, taking responsibility. So the blamer, taking responsibility, orchestrating and aligning resources, solving challenges and removing obstacles, searching for opportunities, being consistent, maintaining focus, staying persistent, striving ahead of normal, giving praise and recognition to others, and providing guidance and course correction. So those statements came from people, books I've read, circumstances I've been put in, and the lessons learned. And I've distilled those as my reminders about leadership and characteristics of leadership that the opposites thereof are what you can see in people maybe that don't look to be a leader, but you can say, oh, that person just constantly blames others and takes zero responsibility. That's one of my personal couple of big ones is being responsible. I am responsible. If someone gets mad at me, I'm responsible, not for their attitude, but I'm responsible for how I react. So in any circumstance, taking on responsibility is one of those top two or three mindsets
Mhm.
that I would really attach my character to, that I really strive towards. Not perfect at it, but it's definitely a constant reminder for me.
I love that. I read well, I shouldn't say recently, but 3 or 4 years ago, 4 years, I guess, gosh, it was at least 4 or 5 years ago now when a book first came out by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership. I don't know if you've read it, but it was a game changer in thought process around being accountable and understanding. And he does a great job. And some people like the book, others don't. But I don't know if you know Jocko Willink, or know of him, but ultimately he was a top performer, Navy SEAL, led teams in Iran, Iraq. And so in that book, he shares stories and incidents that happened and how owning that result, whatever that result was, how important it was for him as the leader of that team, but also for the men on the team. Like some amazing stories in there. And so he would share the story and then he would recap it and then talk about the accountability part of it and how you can own the result. And so that was a real interesting perspective of how often we, and I'll speak for myself, how often I made excuses without realizing that it was an excuse. I wasn't thinking that it was an excuse. It was, to me, it was like, oh, these circumstances, this is what happened. And then without unpacking it and going a little bit deeper on that. So it was a real interesting insight into what I see often in business owners is looking and blaming circumstances, looking at what happened without stepping back from it and going, okay, where did I play a role in this? And in the book, Extreme Ownership, it really is worth a read. The other one that showed up for me was Tools of Titans. Tim Ferriss wrote it, Tools of Titans, and
Yeah.
great book. He interviewed, I think, 200 CEOs, and it was really great. And I will make this comment, and then I'll pass it over to you, Rod. But my interpretation of reading that book, and I read it cover to cover, and really it was just short stories of different CEOs. It was really great. But one pattern that I saw that I didn't have, that all of the most successful CEOs that were in that book, on their list of things that they wanted to share, was how often they said no instead of yes. I'm a yes guy more than I'm a no guy, and I've shifted that over the years. But it's easy to kind of buy into an idea, say yes, and of course that all goes sometimes, not always, but sometimes can go a
Yeah.
little bit south because it over commits your time, your energy, your finances, whatever it might be. What has your kind of experience been around that? Is that your own observation of entrepreneurs, or where even with yourself?
Yeah, I think it's the lesson I learned that I apply myself, it was probably a big one because a couple entrepreneurs did this, and you'll hear entrepreneurs talk about energy and there's all these different ways you can package it, but to me, I distilled it down to choosing what you give permission to, meaning that sports. I know you're a hockey guy, but probably one of the most frustrating sports that involves referees is basketball because it's very fluffy as to what's a foul and the speed and everything else. And if you're a basketball player and you get ticked at a call that did or didn't happen, and now all of a sudden that mindset now affects how you play the next few minutes, and or you bark off at the referee and you get ejected or teed up or whatever it may be, realize that you're responsible. And if you give permission for that external stimuli to influence your mindset, your emotions, whatever, that's your fault. But now turn that lesson around. To me, this is so the biggest learning I had was learning and understanding that this is a computer and it's programmable. And I'm
Mhm.
able to stave off a lot of tough business decisions, emotional issues, whatever, when I say with that little voice on your shoulder in the back of your head that I don't give permission to have that influence my mindset right now,
Mhm.
and just block it out. And I've to the point now where literally I can literally not think about it, which is great if you're looking to stay focused on something and there's multiple things coming at you. So whether it's sports, whether it's family, whether it's a very tumultuous situation in life, the reality is you can give permission to things you want to so you can stay focused on what you do want to stay focused on. That is a huge, huge benefit. That's probably one of the biggest benefits I've learned to coach myself and discipline myself with. But I don't think I ever would have even found that or even found that to be of any value had I not been in the space that I'm at. Realizing that high performing entrepreneurs deal with big decisions, they deal with big issues, deal with challenging issues that would at the outside you go, how do you deal with that? How do you even find a moment to sleep when that's happening in your world? And the
Mhm.
reality is there's a way to do that. And so I think that even that your example of yes and no, because there's that thought process of I want to please, it's the right thing to do. We think we're doing a good thing by saying yes, but then we soon realize that too many yeses starts to impede some of the other yeses we said yes to. And some
Yes.
of the no's now have to work in alignment with other things like missions and visions and values and other things. And it's not right or wrong. Sometimes there's just the right thing to do versus doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And those can be interpreted as two different things because right is still right, but there's a difference between doing the right thing and what the right thing to do might be. So those are kind of just my perspectives. I don't know if I'm skirting around it, but that's where I landed.
No. It's all great. There's when I kind of pull on a couple threads. I don't necessarily have an intention around it, other than to kind of open up and see where the conversation might go. There's a couple of different individuals that I know and I've coached over the or been coached by over the years, and one of the things that I've learned is around making values driven decisions, aligning with individuals who share common values. I think you're similar in that, in terms of even the self funding house and kind of the vision that you and Derek have for the self funding house and who you guys are as business owners, as individuals, as men, is that what I get is that we align in values in terms of just who we are as people, as men, and as business owners, and what the intention is behind an initiative like the Self Funding House. So for me, as we, work together and get to know each other better going into the future, one of the realizations that I have is that it flows pretty easy when you share common values with the person that you're working with. Did you learn that consciously early on, or was it just how you operated right from the get go? What was your kind of experience in learning and understanding just how important aligning values are with the people that you work with your team, with
Yeah.
potential partners, etc.?
So I think that one is different than my entrepreneurial journey. Entrepreneurship was a nurture. This one I think I can stem back because values, character, and integrity were
Mm-hmm.
three things that I was brought up with. Regardless of your faith, faith is a component of it. Your family life is a component of it. Your working environment and the choices you make allow your choices to be better when you have the filters of values, integrity, and character. Because what are the things you think of if you're in a dark room with all the lights out? That probably is going to somehow eventually get down to values. Character and integrity are not what you say, it's what others say about you when you're not around.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they also are the things that don't have to be spoken when someone can just trust you. I mean, those are bricks that get laid early on in life, I believe, because it's easy to tear those down, but very difficult to build them up.
Mm-hmm.
You can tweak, your values because you can learn and you can have more exposure to that. But I think character and integrity is something you should adhere to early on, and most importantly, protect. And so they do mean a lot because I've definitely found decisions and choices I've had to make to not work with an individual versus working with an individual, hiring an individual, firing an individual, based on those types of misalignments. Because in the right entrepreneurial, uh, I guess, environment, people who are not of the same values will naturally get purged because
Right.
they'll be surrounded with those values applied in actions, conversations, etc., and they'll naturally purge it. Sometimes I'll have enough patience to let them purge, and other times I'll go, you know what, it's like Jim Collins, the bus, getting them on the right bus, then in the right seats, etc. That to me is a great visual, and I think that applies to not just businesses, it applies to this. And this is where the values, the character, integrity stick in. And I think that, human beings are a difficult animal because we are human beings. We're not human doings. We don't do stuff. We are beings, meaning that, what we say, all those negatives. We can talk about all the negative things in the job place that have to do with people, the bickering, the storytelling, the whatever it may be. You shouldn't have time for that. You shouldn't even be thinking about that. When you are of the same mindset and the values, stuff can get done so that the unspoken doesn't have to be spoken. Do you believe in this? Do you think we're doing the right? Like, no, I think we're doing the right thing, Patrick, and your answer will come within 10 seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
if you are aligned, of values, it makes decision making easy, and more importantly, it makes objectives and goals and other things you're striving towards. It's great to see you go, yeah. When you get multiple people excited about the same thing, that's when you don't add, you multiply. And I think these are all formulas that center around values because values is a multiplier in many, many ways.
For me, values is probably one of the most important conversations that I have with my existing teams in terms of who we are as a business and the individuals that, the culture that we want to have, because it's all built around common values. What I've learned over the years and what I've witnessed is that often people don't really know what their values are. They live into a set of values. They think it's moral values, it's societal values. They live a set of values of their parents, for example, that, listen, we there's lots of people with parents who go, I don't share any of those values. I don't agree with my dad, my mom, whatever the story might be, but they're not really aware of what their values are. So how do you be true to yourself when you don't understand it? So first off, I think for many it's a conscious learning of understanding yourself to say, what do I really value? What is important to me? How do I be in integrity when I don't even know if I'm being true to myself? And then there's the conversation, I think, too, and it's kind of a big conversation, is that a lot of people are afraid to be truly who they are as they start to go on a self discovery, perhaps, journey, or just start to realize it in their life because they're afraid of the judgment of others. Yet, I know that when you are true to yourself, you will attract like minded people. To your point earlier, those who don't align with your values will ultimately purge themselves, or you'll purge them. You'll purge, one way. And it doesn't have to be anything critical. It just, we drift away because we don't share common values. And it's such a big lesson, I think, for business owners in terms of even how they align their culture and who they hire. Within my own sales team in my retail business, we culturally, we have had this conversation. We look for a good sales guy, and my general managers phone me, go, I got this really good sales guy, and like, he'll crush it. But I'm a little bit worried. He's a little bit like this and a little bit like that, and I don't know how he'll really align with the rest of the team. I go, dude, why do we have to keep having this conversation? That if you bring somebody toxic into an environment, regardless of how good a sales guy he is, it's going to go south. And then you're going to have spent a year or 6 months or 2 years, fighting fires. And then you're going to leave this big gap because you're going to end up firing him. So it's like, so quit it. But we have to sometimes get grounded back in that. The point is that like attracts like. There are no values that are wrong. Like, my values aren't right and yours are wrong, or vice versa. They're just your values. They're my values. And if we stay true to ourselves, stay in integrity, then ultimately that's what we're trying to align with, is people of similar values. So I know that's kind of a long explanation of how I see it. How do you, is that in alignment with what you think too, Rod?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely influenced. Because think about it for a second. Now, if you and I were employees at a company, I think today a lot of people take on a job for one reason only. They need an income, and then the career path might be a second thought, et cetera, et cetera. But in that workplace, there's a culture and there's a set of mission, vision, values in that organization as well. And I don't think too many people going to look for a job, different for someone looking for a career, too many people looking for a job probably don't check that part out. It's an afterthought. So the question begs out there is like, what about personal values? Are they ever thought of when in the job space? Like, do they have to align in your workspace, or is it you outside with your family? And the answer to me is like, you get to decide. You get to decide because you're the only one that answers to your own values. But
Mm-hmm.
I agree, values are very, very important. And I think that they only really get discussed when principals talk to each other, entrepreneurs, joint venture partners, people at that level. Coworkers don't sit around. I don't think. I know I didn't. Don't sit around at lunch. Talking about what's your values, what's your about. Like,
No, they
that
don't.
isn't part of the culture of that, right? Because there is no repercussion. There's more repercussions outside of the workplace, like at home and all those other areas of your life. But I think that in the entrepreneurial world, your work is your life is your work, if your values are looked after.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're not looked after, that's when you hear people say, oh, I've got my work hat on, I've got my home hat on.
Yeah.
In the way I think is, I only have one hat.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to have three different hats and remember who I'm talking to and which hat should be on. So I think that's kind of the best picture I could give where values come in, is that values can have a far reaching or a shallow reach on who you are and what you do. And I think people like you and I that are doing what we're doing, talking even the way we're talking right now, that's probably, I think Patrick Francie only wears one hat,
Mhm.
in who he is and how he does life. I think it's much like me because I think that when your wife and your family talks to you, it's probably a similar tone of voice and a similar whatever. It's not a foreign person talking to the family versus the person who's on the other end of a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever it may be. So I think that's my perspective is that having those common, I even thought you can put mission, vision, and values in one bucket when it's only one hat. You don't, and I think that's probably why so many things line up. That's why I don't want to retire from something. You retire from things you don't like. Maybe you and I don't want to retire for something because we don't dislike it. We do like it. And so when, mission, vision, values, business, life, and success, and all those things fit under one hat, it simplifies life and makes it really easy to enjoy it, embrace it, and live it daily. And that way you don't get these conversations like, oh, you're out of balance. You're out of balance when you have multiple hats, and oh, you better spend some time with your kids. You bet, like, that shouldn't be an equation if you're doing it right. And when if you're not, and if you are having those conversations, I think that's when you should then seek the counsel on how you get to a different situation. And
Well,
it's not.
it's I'm always often surprised, and I know that you don't live in that world. We just because you just stated it, is that how many people will and how often we hear, I just want work life balance. And the realization I had many years ago was I had been on stage and I did a keynote and spoke and talking about what I was doing and blah 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 and all. And afterwards, a young man came up to me and he goes, "Gosh, Patrick, how many hours a week do you work?" And it threw me off because I went. And I said to him, I thought for a minute. I go, I don't look at it that way. It's just my life. And I love what I do. So I don't really think about this as work. Me getting on a plane or me speaking or me working with my team. It's just part of my life. It's what I do. So I don't look at how many hours a week I work. I don't look at it that way. I'm not striving for this. I don't have this thought process about what is work life balance. It's just life. And that was a big, I guess it was one of those aha moments in that, oh gosh, I'd never been asked that question. But when I was, it was a real moment in time where I just reflected and was really clear. I go, I don't look at it that way because it's just my life. And I'm not
Yeah.
seeking any balance in that regard. When I need downtime, then I take downtime. And does that look like a vacation? Does it look like a day out of the office? Does it look like some time spent hanging out with some friends? Whatever it might be, but that's more about rest. It's not about balance. We all need rest. And I honor the fact that sometimes if I push myself through a project or I'm working hard, okay, I need some downtime. I need a rest. That's it. That's how I view it. And so it is an interesting conversation how many believe that there is a work life balance. And I don't know what that means anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's with the life that attracted me along that nurturing process is that when you ultimately had a say, initially it starts out with just a say in, money and time, because usually those two are tightly coupled in the job space. The money
Mhm.
equals the amount of time you put in, and there's an expectation on both parties in both buckets. You'll put in 40 hours and you'll be paid for 40 hours.
Mhm.
And you and I are well past that because now it's no longer that those are not the two buckets we monitor. The bucket we monitor tends to, for me anyways, is guided more by, what I said earlier, like what matters most. Well, you dream, goal, struggle, victory. Where am I at in terms of, and there's not just one path either. There's many of those paths in parallel that I'm working on, whether that's work or a project or something bigger, a business, venture, whatever it may be. And so I think that, having control of time and money compared to a job changes the context. Because that
Mhm.
guy who caught you coming off stage, if he, had a minute by minute dissertation of your week, he would might accuse you of having worked a 70-hour work week because what he thought was work is different than what you and I might think is quote work.
Mhm.
Because he's driving towards a paycheck. You and I are driving towards a different destination. And I think that's apples and oranges.
So, as we kind of come around towards the end of this show, I don't want to step over the conversation around the self funding house that we brought up. And, the self funding house was really an initiative that was originally driven by Derek Lobo. You and he co wrote uh, 3 books, I think, now. And you've got a background in that, I recall. But the self-funding house is a concept to say, okay, there's a big problem in the world today when we're specifically talking about Canada, and that is around the affordability of housing, about individuals who, young, generally people that have a dream of owning a home one day and having that, backyard and maybe white picket fence, whatever that might look like, and feeling like there's just no way to achieve that. Now, you and Derek as entrepreneurs, myself as entrepreneurs, we go, okay, here's a problem to solve that really plays into a much bigger kind of cause, which is to say, times have changed. There is a way for you to do it. You have to shift how you view home ownership and the path to achieve that goal. So, do you want to give a little bit of background on the self funding house concept, Rod?
Sure. I mean, what originally started out as just being what you described, which was, Derek and I were just going to impart knowledge and wisdom and give back to the general population. Our kids was the target market. We just wanted to attack their mindset to think differently about their home like a business by simply becoming a landlord, putting in a backyard ADU, a basement apartment, because by having that additional income, you can increase affordability. Not a new concept, but we realized, as we went along the venture, because the books quickly became a business, because we realized there were pieces of the puzzle to pull together. And if we did that, we would help the overall goal of helping the younger generations realize affordability. Because we realized, well, hey, let's get financial institutions involved. Let's get them to recognize the rental income towards mortgage qualification to increase, the affordability of ownership. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's get educational people like Rain involved so that there's a journey for them beyond just taking ownership of a home and being in the market, which is very, very important. That they, whether they realize it or not, there could perhaps be positive financial implications if they continue their journey of education along the idea of owning real estate. We also realize that municipalities and government are a big part of this as well. That if they can help developers develop affordable solutions, i.e. these homes with these self-funding house concepts, and put into it, and that's what we've done. We've worked now with developers to help them build homes, new construction with basement suites, bring in a financial partner, and tell that community, hey, you can afford a house in today's marketplace, because we have a system where that rental income that can be used and count towards your mortgage qualification. And we also have a system to coach you along the way. Here are some resources. We're going to teach you about landlord tenancy. We're going to show you how to organize your finances. We're even going to work with you for another year after you take possession of your house. The bottom line was, Patrick, we wanted to guide the buying experience and hold the buyer's hand through the entire process. And that's what we had to teach developers. We had to show and teach municipalities. We had to show and teach financial institutions. And the positive that came away from this whole scenario, Patrick, was, to me, and I've only thought about it here in the last year, is I think for maybe the first time, or at least the first time in a long time, we've got politics, financial, builders, and the public all wanting the same thing, because every government wants to solve the problem of affordability, because it's starting to affect the business of a city. They can't attract businesses, they can't attract and keep their younger generations because of affordability. And I've made it a personal mission with Derek Lobo to say, you know what, we're going to be the people to bring together the banks, the builders, the municipal governments, the other levels of government, the actual home buyers together, and say it is possible. Let's just get this solution in front of our younger generations and help them with this. Because at the end of the day, builders are not going to be able to build houses cheaper. Land is what it is. Construction costs are what they are. Labor costs are what they are. They're not coming down anything significantly. And I know my sons and my daughters' income is not going to go up tenfold, 100-fold, to get them to a point where a home is only 2 or 3 times their income, like it was when I bought this house 20 years ago. My son's house was 15 times his income that he bought a year and a half ago. So that was the challenge. We think we're just at the beginning of our journey, but we've got a vision, and we've yet to hear a person say that's not a good idea. And we're building a great team of collaborators from a variety of industries to help us do this. But at the end of the day, we realize if it is to be, it's going to be up to us. Derek and I have just decided we're going to do this because it's already making a difference. We got 4 developments. We've got over 50 of these houses sold, and we haven't yet started to really expand and build out the idea. So that's the mission, that's the vision, and our values is one of let's just make home ownership possible for others. That's
You
the
know,
self-funding house.
I love it. There's a fundamental that, what you've done is you've built the platform for potential first time home buyers to actually start to engage or to be able to take on and own a piece of real estate to grow their financial futures. Because ultimately, when we look at what's going on economically, real estate is still one of those hard assets, one of those stores of value that will set you apart. And when you look at, you know, currency, fiat currency as an example, not having it invested is literally, devaluing. I mean, our dollar inflation is what it is. At the end of the day, we can complain about it, and the reality, it just is what it is, and it won't go away. It's not going to change. So how do we create a financial future? And real estate is one of the ways to actually achieve that goal. What you and Derek have done is, when you think about it, is pretty remarkable because, to your point, you've brought all of these things together to create the environment for somebody to step up, get the additional education, to make a commitment to themselves, and then they've got the tools, the education, the support that they need. And yes, they're going to have to work at it. Nobody's going to do it for them. I think that's what really often, isn't it, what sets apart the successful from those who kind of bitch about being mediocre? Is, are you, here it is. It's, the door is open. It's up to you. I can open the door. I can't drag you through it. I can't, there's a phrase that I often have used, which is, I can't want something more for you than you want it for yourself. I'll open the door. I'll even build a set of stairs, but you have to go up the stairs. You have to go through the door. And that's really kind of what you and Derek have done, is you say, okay, here's the problem. Here's how to solve it. We're going to support you in solving it. Now it's time, if you really want to achieve that outcome, you have to step up.
Yeah.
Is that in alignment with your thought process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It kind of is in alignment with why we're even here today, because if we can just also not only just fulfill that dream or give a path to that dream of home ownership for these younger generations, but in the meantime, bolt on the benefits of learning how to be a business owner, that plus a path for future financial multiplication, wealth creation, etc. I don't think that first time home buyer realizes that day one. They see this
No.
as maybe just as a solution to getting their first home. And I think that's totally okay with me, because just get in the market is the underlying foundational message. But maybe we can feel really good about ourselves, Derek and I, because and I know you and Rain are big supporters of this, and we're just at the cusp of the beginning of this. But I think we're also doing a positive thing for these future generations too, by putting them in a position to become a business owner, not while still having their job or career or profession, because it's only going to make them better. They're going to learn life skills. They're going to learn financial skills. They're going to pay attention to things they wouldn't pay attention to before. And at the end of the day, those skills are only going to help them better at their job, career, and profession as well. So I think there's different layers of this win, 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 win. And there's multiple wins for the home buyer. There's wins for government. There's wins for financial institutions. There's wins for builders who can't sell houses in today's economy. So it's like I said, there's not too many times, and I don't know of any time where everybody wants the same thing, and there's very few, if any, headwinds. I mean, it should be so easy to put these pieces of the puzzle together, and I can't believe nobody else has done it before us. Because we didn't invent basement apartments. We didn't invent being a landlord. We're just orchestrating and aligning. And so maybe sometimes the simplest ideas are the best, and we hope it does wind up being the best for the sake of all of our kids and grandkids yet to come.
The message I'd want to get to everybody in terms of the self-funding house, of those individuals who do have dreams of owning their own home and a vision for, you know, considering what their, future financial situation might be. Financial, I use security, financial certainty, financial freedom, and it does take engagement, it takes education, it takes support to achieve that goal. I think that there is a shift that has to happen culturally, that says the days of buying a house like you bought a house, Rod, or I bought a house are gone. Your son had to go, okay, yeah, dad, it's like 15 times my income. And you were there to support, guide, educate. But if if people are sitting on the sidelines thinking that, number one, the government's going to solve the problem, and or that they're angry because it isn't what it once was, it's changed. The housing market has changed, and it's changed forever. Ever. Many think there's going to be a bubble burst, a crash, and I just can't see it. And I've been looking at the economic data for many years, and I just don't see that happening. So that's a fear that some will have to get over. The other is the fear of, being a landlord, the fear of having to learn, and can I learn it? The point is that for those who have a desire to be financially successful and own their own home, they're going to have to actually take action and get off the sidelines and not live into an old story. That may sound a little bit direct or harsh, but I think too many, far too many, are living into a story that the government will fix it, and or it's wrong because it isn't the way my parents did it. I don't know if you have a view on that. That's just my
Yeah,
view.
I'll apply it to what we talked about earlier: dream, struggle, dream, goal, struggle, victory,
Mm.
dream of home ownership. So I'm hoping that, because I think the biggest opportunity here is for all the people who've already given up on the idea of owning a house. They need to hear this message that home ownership is possible in today's market, in spite of interest rates, in spite of costs. It's possible. I'll say one thing: you can have a $60,000 a year income and support a house in today's market, in good secondary, tertiary markets here in Ontario, where I live. So the dream of home ownership, the goal is, okay, the dream, the goal, learn about it, and actually get to the point of where you believe it, do it, and take possession of it. And now you own a self-funding house, brand new house. The struggle, okay, yeah, I've never been a business owner, I've never been a landlord. I got to find the right tenant. All these doubts you're going to learn there, and we'll be with you to help you do that. And the first victory is going to be, we did it. We got a renter. We actually have a flourishing business that's looking after my mortgage. We're creating equity. We're at a place where we didn't think pre-dream we'd ever would be, because we gave up that dream. But the journey continues on because of what you and I have been talking about, both on and off air, is that, well, now they've done it once. Is it possible to do it again? Now, from the idea of multiplying their capital, multiplying their equity, their finances, their wealth creation, because there's nothing stopping them from buying another one, or taking that one, renting out upstairs and downstairs, and now being in a position to buy a bigger home or in a different location, or have more choices
Yeah.
that pre-dream they didn't have. And I think that that's my application of what you just said to what we've been talking about here, is that here's another way. I want my sons, I want all the younger generation to think like an entrepreneur, have that dream, realize that goal, because it's possible. We've now laid out the framework. Yeah, there's going to be struggles, but embrace it. That's called learning. And there's a victory. In fact, there's multiple victories that you could take a hold of with this. So that's a great way, I think, of just pulling the messages together here.
Beautiful. Okay, on that note, you've been generous with your time. I appreciate the conversation, Rod. We will wind things down, and uh, although I normally would ask a number of questions, I'm going to leave it on this note today. Rod, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful that I get to surround my world with people that are smarter than me and loving it.
Mm,
Maybe Rod, way back when, job mentality Rod, would have been intimidated, would have been, oh, I think I'll go hang out with my hockey or my baseball buddies because it's more comfortable. And that's what I'm thankful for, because maybe that's my journey. My journey is to keep on learning and surrounding myself with smarter, bigger, faster people than me, because that's how you become. And that's what I'm thankful for.
Such a great lesson. And thanks for sharing that. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to have great conversations and kind of get and unpack things. And Rod, you were a great guest and a great conversation to have today. I appreciate your time. I am grateful to have had the opportunity to get to know you, to work with you a little bit, and look forward to the future. I'm always grateful for my wife and my family and this community. So thanks very much, everybody. And Rod, we'll look forward to having more conversation in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick.